So in the beginning of Matt Murdock's superhero career, we were given a number of origin stories for Daredevil, and they all showed how Matt Murdock began to train to become the Man Without Fear. All of these seem to show Matt, a blind kid with otherworldly senses, teaching himself how to fight. It wasn't until Frank Miller's run on Daredevil, the Man Without Fear, which is arguably one of the greatest runs, where it was revealed that Matt had indeed been trained by another blind martial artist expert named Stick. Bringing Stick into the mix allowed Daredevil to gain a whole other level, turning him into a more of a ninja adventure series with Stick training Matt as a tool to be used against the Hand. This new ninja side to Matt Murdock worked incredibly well, and Daredevil's ninja training has become a major part of his background, both in the comics and in the Netflix Daredevil series. The initial idea left a lot of room for later writers to add and tweak certain things to help build other stories too, which is super cool.
This is a retcon to undo a retcon, and I'm honestly so glad this one happened. In Original Sin, it was revealed that Norman Osborn had slept with Gwen Stacy, with the two of them having an affair that produced 2 twin children. These children were raised to believe that Spider-Man was their true father and that he had also killed their mother, with Norman of course manipulating them as part of a scheme to, you guessed it, destroy Spider-Man. In the end, however, we'd come to learn that none of this was true. The children were not conceived by Gwen. Gwen never even slept with Norman. It was all part of Harry Osborn's plan to mess with his father as revenge for mistreating him all those years. The children instead were false, lab-made genetic fabrications, and Norman's mind was messed with to make him think he'd slept with Gwen when really that had just never happened at all. It's a bit convoluted, I'll grant you, but it cleaned up such a terribly awful mess left to us by Original Sin, I'm just willing to forgive it for that.
Stan Lee and Jack Kirby brought Captain America into the Silver Age in Avengers number 4, and in that story they revealed that Bucky Barnes had passed away in the same explosion that sent Captain America into becoming a popsicle. But then we got the relaunch of Captain America in 2005 with artist Steve Epting, and Bucky was back. The idea was that Bucky was rescued, captured, and subjected to intense brainwashing by the Soviets, turning him into one of the deadliest assassins in the Marvel Universe. They would then put him into cryogenics after every one of his missions, so that he has barely aged in the decades since they first began using him. Now, Bucky's time as a ruthless brainwashed assassin was colored by dark deeds and chilling actions. He came into contact with tons of characters like Nick Fury or Black Widow, who he helped train. And he even ended the life of Wolverine's wife, Itsu. The Winter Soldier has proven to be an excellent addition to the Marvel mythos.
Finally, some kind of justice for Leslie Tomkins in this next retcon, although we can never fully undo the character assassination that was done to her, let's be honest. With Leslie, what ended up happening was that she was initially a close ally of Batman's who was critical of him, but only because she cared, but who with one decision was turned into a borderline villain. When Stephanie Brown ends up tormented by Black Mask, Tomkins later takes her in and attempts to save her life, but ultimately fails. At least that's what we thought at first. Later on, it's revealed that Leslie actually let Stephanie die simply to prove a point to Batman and to convince him that having young sidekicks was a bad idea. Fortunately, this would later be retconned so that Tomkins simply faked Stephanie's death to teach Batman a lesson. It's still honestly pretty messed up, but at least it's still less messed up than the initial reveals.
Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson introduced Swamp Thing as scientist Alec Holland, who found himself caught in a mysterious explosion, forced to run out into a swamp where he perished and was transformed into a creature made up of pieces of said swamp. That remained the story for a number of years, including an ongoing series. But then, during a second Swamp Thing series, Alan Moore came on to write. In his very first issue, Moore wrapped up all of the plots of the previous writer, but it ended with Swamp Thing seemingly passing away. But fret not, since that then led into the legendary Saga of the Swamp Thing number 21, The Anatomy Lesson. Alan Moore revealed that we were not prepared for the truth of Swamp Thing at all. That truth being that Alec Holland didn't actually become a creature made up of the swamp. Instead, the swamp was animated into thinking that it was Alec Holland. This change opened up Swamp Thing tremendously, and it's what led to the character becoming so unbelievably powerful with the whole Parliament of Trees thing.
I really like this one, and I think it makes a ton of sense when you consider the also kinda retconned in general past of these two characters. We're talking about about the relationship between Bucky Barnes, Winter Soldier, and Natasha Romanoff's Black Widow. Back at a time when they were both working for Russia. Both being gifted assassins, they of course crossed paths, and Bucky even trained Natasha at one point, it's true. Bucky at the time was brought into the Red Room to act as a trainer and met Nat there. They secretly started having an affair, but once their superiors caught on, they actively separated these two. They wouldn't reunite until years later, both believing the other one must have died, only to find out that they were both still alive somehow all these years after.
When Superman was laid low by Doomsday during the Death of Superman story arc, 4 new characters showed up that claimed to have a connection with him. One of these was Superboy, also known as Connor Kent. Project Cadmus decided to try and make a clone of Superman to try and fill the void, and they were successful with this new version of Superboy that had powers based around telekinesis. For years, it was unknown where the other half of Superboy's DNA came from. It wasn't until nearly a decade later with Teen Titans #1 from 2003 that the Titans discovered the secondary DNA source belonged to none other than Superman's greatest nemesis, Lex Luthor. The internal dichotomy between his two opposing biological precursors became a driving force for Connor Kent and made him question if nurture could truly overcome nature.
I have mixed feelings about this next one, to be honest with you. When Hal Jordan turned evil, it was an interesting twist for his character. It was something very different, but one that it also felt we'd kind of been building to for some time, putting Green Lantern more and more into a place where he'd basically be pushed beyond the edge of reason. Seeing him turn to the side of evil and become a villain made sense in a way. But comics had another explanation for us in terms of why Hal went from 0 to 1000 on the evil scale. It was actually all because of fear. It was about Parallax, who had managed to cling onto that fear and possess Hal Jordan, since Parallax was trapped within the central power battery and also manifested in the Green Lantern Corps' weakness to the color yellow. So this was in a way a retcon that solved not just one but actually 2 problems, if you will. Although I do think it was smart of DC to implement this retcon and that it makes a heck of a lot of sense. I'm still not completely sold on whether it was needed, at least in regards to Hal, but hey, it definitely works and I feel like a lot of people like it.
There are plenty of DC characters that have used the name Sandman. However, it was Neil Gaiman's magnum opus, The Sandman #1 from 1988, that finally revealed the secret history that brought them all together. The Sandman revealed that after Morpheus, aka Dream of the Endless, the lord and personification of all dreams and reality, was imprisoned, his absence led the universe to gift portions of Dream's power to several people, including Wesley Dodds, who became plagued by extremely vivid dreams and inspired him to become the Justice Society's Sandman. There was also the Bronze Age Sandman Hector Hall, whose consciousness had been cast into the Dreaming, where it was discovered by Brute and Glob, which were former servants of Morpheus, who turned Hall into a surrogate Dream King following the imprisonment of Morpheus in the early 20th century. His consciousness became trapped in the consciousness of a boy named Jed Walker. There was also Garrett Sanford, who had a similar thing going on with him, and of course there is Sandy Hawkins, the sidekick of the original Sandman, Wesley Dodds, who took on the Sandman mantle and wears a mask that appears to be a cross between his old mask, Wesley Dodds' mask, and the helm of Dream of the Endless. If you read the story, you know it's a bit more complex than what I just said, but Morpheus' existence revealed just how powerful the Sandman legacy really was.
Honestly, one of my favorite retcons is also one of the saddest. There are some figures out there who I feel have a certain air of mystery, if you will. When we give them backstories, origins that are super defined, in fact for some characters, I feel like it can ruin those characters to a degree. When it comes to Deadpool though, I feel like his origin is one of the most tragic. I like how Deadpool cracks jokes, don't get me wrong, he has made me laugh in comics many times over and on the big screen, but I also love us exploring why he feels a need to do this, and why he is so seemingly crazy, or at least why he chooses to appear that way. At one point, Deadpool's true parents' existence is confirmed in the worst story for Deadpool we could have gotten ever. While being manipulated and not remembering who his parents were at the time as a result of much brain tampering, Deadpool is sent to eliminate his parents by burning their house down with them inside it. It's a truth that is revealed through Original Sin, and honestly I think one of the best retcon reveals in that event, in my opinion. That's about it. I'm your host Amanda McKnight. Thank you so much for watching. It's been an honor, and for one of my last, but not the last, and final time, you stay nerdy, YouTube.